After coming home from a week-long honeymoon, we heard strange noises coming from inside the house. We were worried that it might be a burglar. "Do you hear that? Someone might be in the house. Should we call the police?" my husband and I said. "It's fine," my husband replied and walked inside. I followed him in a hurry and found my mother-in-law and sister-in-law inside. Relieved it wasn't a burglar, I still couldn't understand why they were in our house. "Hi, you're back. Welcome home. Where are my souvenirs? Did you get the bracelet I asked for?" my mother-in-law asked. "There's no way we bought that. It's too expensive," I responded, feeling stunned as they continued their animated conversation. "Why are you guys here? You're annoyed, right? You aren't here, aren't you? Houses are vulnerable and empty. We stay to protect your home. You should be thankful," my mother-in-law explained. Apparently, they had taken the keys from my husband to look after the house while we were gone. "You should have consulted me first," I whispered to my husband. "They offered to watch the place last minute. I didn't have time to consult you," he responded. I decided to let it go, figuring their presence had at least deterred burglars. But when I looked around, every room was a mess. Sister-in-law's clothes filled our closet, items were strewn all over the living room floor, and the dining table was cluttered with various things. Despite our return, mother-in-law and sister-in-law showed no signs of leaving. "It's getting late. You should head home," I suggested. "We're family. Why bother about formalities?" sister-in-law said, continuing to make themselves at home. I had hoped they'd leave the next day, but even after I returned from work, they were still there. I made it clear they needed to go, but they insisted, "We're family, so don't bother about us." I was still doing all the cooking, cleaning, and laundry, so Dave and I decided we have to ask them to leave. While cleaning the rooms, I noticed one of my perfumes was missing. It was a limited edition perfume that is not available now and cost over $300, so it was something I used to cherish. In a rush, I asked my mother-in-law, and she had no idea about the perfume. When I confronted my sister-in-law, she said, "Oh, I have that," and pulled the perfume out of her bag. But almost none of it was left. I had been saving it, and at least 60% was supposed to be left. "It smells good, doesn't it?" My friend said so too. So I yelled it to them. She said it so casually, without any remorse, that I finally lost my temper. "Why are you using it without asking? What you're doing is theft. Did anyone teach you not to steal? Seriously, I just bared it. Why are you making such a big deal? If you only borrowed it, will you give it back? Fine. But I used some, so half the price should be okay, right? I don't want money, I want the same item back." "Wow, you're pretty. It's just perfume. I know your brand. It's not that expensive," she said, checking the price on her phone. "What? Why is this so expensive? Spending $300 on perfume is stupid. If it's so important, lock it up." She seemed flustered, realizing it was more expensive than she thought. "It was important, so I only use it at home. I never thought I have a teeth as a relative who barge in and use my things." "Don't call me a thief for using some perfume while we are arguing." Dave came home. "What's all this noise? Listen, Ro, I use a bit of her perfume, and she's calling me a thief." Leaving the loud sister-in-law in the living room, I explained everything to Dave in the bedroom. "I can't take it anymore. Kick mother-in-law and sister-in-law out." "Don't get so mad. I hadn't told you yet, but we are all going to leave here now." I was stunned by the unexpected news. Our old house is falling apart. We were debating repairs or moving. Leaving here saves money, and we have room. "Why didn't you consult me? Don't I contributed to the mortgage?" "Mom already started selling the old house. We're all living here. If you don't like it, leave." I felt my affection for Dave cooling at his unilateral decision. Understood. With that, I began packing only the essentials into my suitcase. Dave didn't stop me. Instead, he said, "Running away after a fight is childish," and returned to the living room. Mother-in-law and sister-in-law smirked as they watched me pack. As soon as I stepped out the door, they locked it behind me. I had no intention of ever going back to that house, so I felt nothing about leaving. I stayed at a hotel and contacted my boss, who I often consult with, to take a few days off. During that break, I found a new place to live and informed my parents that I had moved out because my mother-in-law and sister-in-law had moved in, and Dave told me to leave. I also told my worried parents that I planned to divorce Dave. The only message I received from Dave during this time was an email saying, "You can come back if you repent." They both said they'd forgive you. When I told Dave over the phone that I wanted a divorce, he first responded, "You're divorcing me over this? Can't you just put up with it a little longer?" But when he realized I was serious, he agreed to the divorce. Things progressed smoothly after that, and the divorce was finalized within a few days. I wanted to end things quickly and sever ties, so I left the house today without any division of assets. Although we had been married for less than a year, the divorce led to concerned questions from friends and those around me. The old me might have said it's nothing and kept quiet, but I was over it and told everyone what had happened. Everyone was sympathetic and supportive, so I'm glad I spoke up. Living alone now, I no longer have to spend time on household chores and can focus more on work. I came up with 3 times the usual number of projects and even offered support to those who were struggling. Though my boss was concerned for me, I was grateful to throw myself into work, as being alone would bring back painful memories and make me wonder if I was also at fault. About 5 months after the divorce, Dave called. I had left most of my belongings at the house, so I thought the call might be about disposing of them and answered. At first, he asked things like, "What are you doing now? Are you living alone?" Avoiding the main topic, although Dave is the kind of person who gets grumpy if you don't get to the point, I had to bring it up because time was precious. "Why didn't you call? I want to get back together." I had no intentions of reconciling, so when I tried to hang up, Dave hurriedly stopped me. "Wait, there's something else I have to say. I'm busy, so make it quick. Can you lend me some money? I'm having a hard time with the mortgage payments." Though the mortgage was challenging for Dave alone, it wasn't an amount he couldn't afford on his income. It turned out that Dave thought he'd get a raise soon and would be able to maintain the house even after the divorce. However, the raise didn't happen, and he was told future raises would be difficult, so he decided to quit and find a new job. He thought he'd easily find a job with better conditions, but could only find places offering less pay than his previous job. "I can't lend you any money. Please don't call me again. You're still single, right? No one's going to marry an older woman with a divorce history. So you're better off getting back together with me." Feeling demeaned by his comment, I responded, "No, thank you." And I hung up the phone. I wondered why I ever liked such a person and felt disappointed in my lack of judgment, not just from Dave, but also from my mother-in-law and sister-in-law. The calls kept coming. From what I gathered through their calls, they assumed Dave must be earning well since we bought a new house and had a grand wedding reception. They thought I was the one preventing Dave from giving them more money because he himself said he couldn't afford it. So, Dave believed that if I were out of the picture, they could live comfortably. Turns out Dave's salary was less than they expected, and they panicked, hence the frequent calls. While it's common to think that men earn more than women, I actually make more than Dave. I wanted to block their calls, but Dave knew where I worked. I was afraid they might call or even show up at my workplace, so I answered the phone once in a while. The conversations were always about money. He'd say things like they both are spending too much and draining savings, or they both started part-time jobs, but they're still not making ends meet. I thought if I told them I was also broke, the calls would stop. So, one day, as usual, they said, "We need money for upcoming bills." I responded, "Actually, I'm leaving my current job. I've pretty much depleted my savings. I need money more than you do. If you don't believe me, ask my coworkers." After hearing this, Dave said, "I see," and hung up. As planned, the calls from the 3 of them stopped. When I talked about this with a mutual friend, he told me Dave's situation was worse than I'd heard. Turns out the salary at Dave's new job is less than his previous one, and most of it goes to the mortgage. Not just that, my sister-in-law had an affair with her manager, and was fired when the manager's wife found out. At first, sister-in-law claimed she didn't know he was married, but it turned out she knew his wife was pregnant. The manager and his wife are divorcing, and it's now public knowledge that sister-in-law caused it. She hasn't found a new job and has lost friends. Dave is paying off loans and barely making ends meet. Mother-in-law keeps complaining that their friends have grandchildren, while her children are single and broke, leading to daily arguments. Our friend said Dave thinks he's unattractive since the divorce. But he looks so run down and older than his age. There's no way he's getting any attention. Because I shared the reasons for our divorce, this friend is the only person still speaking to Dave. He tells me everything because he has no one else to talk to. This is the friend who introduced me to Dave. I feel responsible for introducing you too, and besides, hearing about Dave's life is sort of entertaining. He said he's also making sure Dave doesn't get near me again. As for me, I recently co-founded a web magazine company with some old friends from school. I left my job and used up most of my savings to start this company. Even though running a small business means I have to handle a lot of things on my own, it's exciting to continually take on new challenges. I used to be hesitant about diving into new things, but thanks to various experiences, I've gained resilience to overcome hurdles. I've also started a relationship with someone I met through work. He's the kind of person who respects my feelings while taking the lead, and meeting him helped me realize that Dave wasn't a leading man but simply self-centered. After my divorce, I thought for a few months that I couldn't possibly remarry or even date again. But now, I can think positively and want to cherish the happiness in this new chapter of my life.
All right, everyone's presentations are done. Nick, the manager, said as he tried to move the discussion forward. Excuse me, I haven't. I recently found out something. Nick interrupted me and began to speak. There's apparently someone in this department who didn't graduate high school and is just a part-timer. Meetings should be for employees only. Absolutely right. His lackey, Mike, of course, agreed with Nick. I'm leaving. After leaving the meeting room, I started to shut down my computer. I noticed that an email had arrived, not in my personal inbox, but in the company's shared email. Thinking, there's no point in speaking up, no one will listen, I went home quietly. The next day, I heard a commotion from Nick's desk. He was staring at his computer screen, his face pale. Nick? Is something wrong? Mike looked at the screen with him. And he turned even paler than Nick. Why is he so angry? Knowing the reason for Mike's distress, I thought to myself, serves them right. My name is Adam. My mother passed away when I was in the 9th grade, and I was raised by my father. Well, you could hardly call it being raised. After my mother passed, my father changed. He drowned his sorrows in alcohol, and though he still went to work, he squandered our living expenses on horse racing. Because of that, I had to start working part-time as soon as I entered high school. Every month, I went to the convenience store with bills in hand that couldn't be auto-deducted from my father's account. Even though I endured it because I didn't want to be alone, I reached my limit in my 2nd year of high school and dropped out. I found a live-in job at a distant inn. Thank you for everything. The day I left home, my father, still staring at the TV, spoke. Take care. That was our last conversation. Back then, 18 wasn't the age of majority, so I needed my father's permission to work, and I couldn't hide my place of employment. Yet, my father never visited me even once. I kept working just to survive, and before I knew it, I was 42. Years of hard work paid off, and I was transferred to the headquarters. I was thrilled to be recognized by the company, as I thought I'd be working in the field until retirement due to my lack of formal education. Listen up. Our work can change the future of our employees. Don't drag us down. On my first day after the transfer, Nick, dressed in an expensive suit, spoke sternly. There was a reason for this. Our inn was located in a prominent tourist destination, known so well that everyone in the state could sing its commercial jingle. At its peak, we had 5 locations within the state. But that was long ago. Due to financial difficulties and aging facilities, only the place where I had worked for many years and the original establishment remained. I was prepared to lose my job anytime, but now there was a glimmer of hope. With the rise of social media, the tourist area where the inn was located started gaining attention again. Depending on how hard the sales department, where I was transferred, worked, we could either thrive or be forced to give up this prime location to the new hotel chains continuously popping up. For Nick, who had switched careers from another industry to strengthen our sales, this was a battle he couldn't afford to lose. I understood why he had to be strict. I will do my best. Nick sneered at my enthusiastic declaration. Did you not hear what I said? I'm sorry. I thought I was listening carefully. Out of habit from years of customer service, I apologized reflexively, though I had no idea what had offended him. Someone was watching me with a smirk. In this department, There are those who are expected to excel and those who have been shoved here because they have nowhere else to go. You are the latter. It was Mike, the section chief. He's 7 years younger, at 35. But he was called to headquarters much earlier than I was and had been moving around within the headquarters ever since. I'm not jealous, but I can't accept that he's my boss. Graduating from a prestigious university, he has an unusually high pride and caused many problems as a newbie, making things very difficult for me when I was the front desk leader. When I found out Mike was transferred to the sales department a month before me, I was disheartened. Mike is right. With just a middle school diploma, there's not much you can do. Don't even think about achieving results. As if I didn't exist, Nick remarked, I'm thirsty. Mike eagerly ran to the coffee maker. It seems Mike is Nick's lackey. I regretted being happy about my transfer to headquarters, wishing I had stayed on site forever. Send a direct mail to every company on this list by the end of the day. Nick only assigned me tasks that even a new graduate could handle. What? There are over 1,000 companies. You want me to send to all of them by today? Yes, if you and your fellow misfits split the work, even those with nowhere else to go should finish by today. I glanced at the employees typing away expressionlessly. They were worn out from customer service, only thinking about leaving on time, or were women reassigned after having children, with zero motivation for work. Even Sam, a new graduate from the same university as Mike, who was supposed to be among the expected achievers, had no enthusiasm for the job, having joined the company wanting to do customer service. I don't care what they say, I plan to quit anytime, he said. Only Nick and Mike were highly motivated, making all the decisions between the two of them. I originally only wanted to work at the inn to survive and had no particular attachment to this job. I swallowed my words, thinking I had no right to reprimand them. About a month after the transfer, Nick told us with a frustrated look. To commemorate the 50th anniversary, we've decided to create a plan exclusive for one group per day. Originally, Mike and I were supposed to come up with it, but our president, Mr. Thompson, insists on hearing everyone's opinions. So, you all get a chance. As Nick explained, Mike began handing out prints. Make sure not to embarrass Nick. If your ideas are half-baked, you'll have to redo them. It seemed that they had printed his handwritten notes by Mr. Thompson, which included several questions and a section for free responses. It made sense why Nick had to seek our input, given that all responses had to be submitted to Mr. Thompson. We were given a week to think about it, and a meeting was scheduled to compile our ideas. My plan is to let guests enjoy both the old and modern America. Nick began the presentations. Guests would watch a master confectioner at a nearby traditional sweet shop make sweets in front of them. The welcome drink would be premium tea in a bottle. Nick's plan was certainly attractive. After his presentation, Nick called on us to present in the order we were seated. Just as I stood up for my turn. All right, everyone's presentations are done. Excuse me, I haven't. I recently found out something. Nick interrupted me. There's someone in this department who didn't graduate high school and is just a part-timer. He was likely talking about me. I joined the company as a part-timer and was made a full-time employee when I turned 20. That was 20 years ago, so Nick and Mike probably had no chance to know until recently. Meetings should be for employees only. Absolutely right. After that, Nick kept creating opportunities to solicit everyone's opinions, purposefully excluding me from speaking. The meeting unexpectedly heated up and went past the scheduled end time. A few people asked to leave, and the discussion continued with the remaining few. Still here? Normally, you'd leave in that situation. Though I had no attachment to the job initially, hearing kind words from customers made me want to make them happier. For someone like me, with nowhere to go, the inn was my home and customer service was my life. I felt pathetic about my current self. I'm leaving. I left the conference room and started shutting down my computer. I noticed an email had arrived, not in my personal inbox, but in the company's shared email. Thinking no one would listen to what I had to say anyway, I quietly went home. The next day, while preparing the DM as instructed, I heard a commotion from Nick's desk. In his haste to stand up, he hit his knee on the desk. He stared at his computer screen, his face pale. Nick! What's wrong? Mike, thinking he should be the first to rush over, approached Nick while still wearing his coat. He peered at the screen with Nick. And he turned even paler than Nick. Why is he so angry? Who is responsible for this company? Nick, more irritated than ever, asked, and Mike answered without checking. Probably Sam. Sam wasn't there because he was attending a morning training session for new hires. Nick gave up on getting angry and returned his gaze to the screen. They were looking at an email that arrived right after the end of the working day yesterday. Apparently, no one, including me, had checked it before leaving. The email was from a large company that used us for their annual employee trips. The president and executives of that company also frequently used our services personally. President of the company, Mr. Mason himself, had declared that neither he nor his company would ever use our services again. Well, some companies cancel their employee trips or stop using our services due to financial struggles. Let's just move on. Mike kept wiping the sweat from his forehead with a handkerchief. Knowing why Mike was so agitated, I quietly watched their interaction. Do you know how much revenue we get from that company? We can find other guests to fill the rooms, but we'll lose the banquet costs, gift shop revenue, rental car fees, and more. Moreover, the gifts were supposed to be prepared by the traditional confectionery shop involved in Nick's proposed plan. If it's known that we incurred such a huge loss at this critical time, Nick's position in the company would be jeopardized. Nick took a deep breath, seemingly trying to calm himself. All right, Mike. Go to New York right now and apologize to Mr. Mason. What? You're coming with me, right? I have urgent work to do. I trust you, which is why I'm entrusting this to you. Please. Mike, believing Nick's sincerity, agreed with a determined look on his face, saying, yes. That's Nick for you. Even if Mike went to apologize, Nick would shift all the blame onto him if the client didn't change their mind. Well, it was Mike's fault to begin with, so it served him right. About 3 hours later, Sam answered a call from somewhere and repeatedly apologized, saying, I'm very sorry. Everyone watched to see what was happening. After ending the call, he informed Nick with a weary tone. When Mike arrived at the client's company, he only made things worse, further infuriating Mr. Mason. He was demanding, get his boss here immediately. It was no wonder Sam was exhausted, dealing with such a call right after returning from training. What is that idiot doing? All right, Adam, you're coming with me. If sacrificing Mike didn't work, then I must be next. Normally, I'd want to refuse at all costs, but I saw an opportunity in this situation. If I can be of assistance, I'd be happy to join you. I obediently followed Nick, and we flew to New York. When we introduced ourselves at the reception, it became clear how serious the situation was, as the receptionist personally escorted us to the president's office. Angry voices leaked through the door, making both Nick and me uneasy. Excuse me. I'm Nick, the supervisor. I understand my subordinate has caused you trouble, and I deeply apologize. Nick, with his experience in the corporate world, knew enough to offer an apology before excuses. However, his customer service skills left much to be desired. I sighed as I saw Mike trembling like a small dog in the corner of the room. What kind of training are you giving your subordinates? Mr. Mason glared at Nick with a red face. The intensity of his gaze made even Nick take a step back. Regrettably, I joined this company only 2 years ago and was unaware of Mike's issues. I should have identified his shortcomings sooner. Indeed. I should have realized sooner. No sensible person would come to apologize and then give a lengthy presentation on the drawbacks of not using their inn. Nick froze, his mouth slightly open. Suspecting the worst, I picked up the documents that had fallen to the floor. It seemed Mike hastily prepared these documents on the plane, listing the disadvantages. Disadvantage 1: if you change the venue for the company trip, employees might suspect it's for cost-cutting reasons, leading to a negative impression. Reading it aloud half-jokingly, Nick snatched the papers from my hand and checked the contents with a furious expression. Among the stack of documents was a receipt from a nearby convenience store's copy machine. I felt a pang of dread, hoping he hadn't shown the receipt as well. What do you think he said when I asked what kind of nerve he had to do this? I'm very sorry. Faced with the dire situation, Nick must have thought there was nothing left to do but apologize. In a voice smaller than I'd ever heard from him, he uttered words of apology. He said, "I'm a Harvard graduate. I don't believe I said anything wrong." "Mike! What have you done?" Forgetting his plan to pin the blame on Mike, Nick yelled loudly, even in front of Mr. Mason. "I didn't do anything wrong." "You're still saying that? Look at him." Mike pointed at me with a shaking hand. "I was assigned to headquarters in my 20s and now I'm a section chief. This guy only made it to headquarters at 42. Everything I've done proves I was right. So why are we losing the contract?" Having said his piece, Mike collapsed to the floor. "Of course. You were sent there because you had nowhere else to go." Mike never expected to hear such words from someone he looked down upon. He lunged at me, and Nick hurriedly stepped in to stop him. "Mr. Thompson told me Mike is a quick thinker, and to take good care of him." There's no way he was pushed aside. "Don't make things worse here." "He didn't say quick thinker, he said only quick-witted, didn't he?" I don't remember that part." I recalled the many troubles Mike caused when he was a newbie. When Mike was on the front line, his pride was so high that he never apologized to customers. Customer service, especially in our job, doesn't work alone. It brings both good and bad situations. If the front staff or housekeepers made mistakes, or the cleaning company didn't properly clean a room, one had to apologize to the customers regardless of personal fault. Mike, in such situations, would never apologize, insisting he wasn't at fault. This often angered customers, and as the front desk leader, I frequently had to apologize on his behalf. He caused complaints and disrupted operations, which is why he was quickly moved to headquarters. In departments where he didn't interact directly with customers, his quick thinking was beneficial and things went well. But it seemed his flaws were starting to show. Corporate reservations are supposed to be entered into the system by the sales representative. But a quick check yesterday revealed that more than 10 items were missing from the client's reservation. The handover document clearly stated what needed to be prepared. Why didn't you enter it into the system? Why do we have to give them special treatment? Filling rooms near the banquet hall, setting up all the food in advance. Specifying the brand of wine, they're too demanding. No wonder he always angered customers, I thought, feeling a headache coming on. Grouping them in rooms near the banquet hall is for our benefit too. It makes it easier for the staff to set up beds and serve breakfast since everyone's schedule is synchronized. As for the other requests, Mr. Mason suggested them to lighten our load. I didn't know that. Nick finally seemed to realize that Mike was the one who had angered the client. What did you say to them? I just told them we wouldn't give them special treatment anymore. We shouldn't waste effort on things that don't bring in money. I was utterly exasperated at his lack of understanding of customer service. Of course, we shouldn't comply with unreasonable demands. But carrying over successful practices from past stays makes customers feel remembered and enhances their experience. Good memories encourage repeat visits. That's part of our job. I looked down at Mike, who was sitting on the floor. In our job, nothing is a waste. Mr. Thompson likely moved you to the sales department, hoping you'd finally understand this. How do you think he feels now that you've failed to meet his expectations? Mike, tears in his eyes, fled the president's office. I was amazed he still hadn't apologized. You have it tough, Adam. It's okay, we're all employees of the same company. I deeply apologize for this disrespectful incident. Especially after all the care you've shown us. If it weren't for you, Adam, I really would have stopped staying here. When I heard you were moving to the sales department, I was willing to reconsider if you handled it. Seeing us talk so amicably, Nick's face contorted. Do you two know each other? Adam's service is excellent. I always requested him specifically. Normally, we don't accept specific staff requests, but we made an exception for Mr. Mason, adjusting my shifts accordingly. He had personally stayed at our hotel just before my transfer, and during casual conversation, I mentioned, I'm moving to the sales department soon. If I hadn't told him then, things could have been much worse. Please continue to take care of us. I look forward to it. On the return flight, Nick awkwardly offered me a can of beer. It's still working hours. Of course, I had no intention of forgiving him for a single beer. Nick might try to pin everything on Mike and avoid any consequences. While pondering this, a startling fact came to light. Nick, the tea bottles for the plan have arrived. I handed Nick a bottle labeled with our inn's name. They look good. What are you talking about? These are plastic bottles. I had assumed we would use the trendy, high-end bottling tea. But what arrived were ordinary plastic bottles of tea with customized labels. The only unique aspect was the label, which had the inn's name, making it look customized. Upon further investigation, I discovered that a substantial amount of money was set to be paid to the tea company. It was priced like bottling tea. Does this plastic bottle really cost $100 each? The tea inside is specially blended for us. The extra cost is for that. Wouldn't it be better to use another tea company? Or is there a specific reason we must use this one? As Nick continued to make excuses, I showed him a printed email. I informed the tea company's president, Mr. Mitchell, that we discovered irregular payments and he confessed. He said you two were high school classmates and planned to split the extra money. That idiot. Why did he confess? That's not important. You should worry about yourself, this could turn into a police matter. Opening the bottle cap, I suggested. How about calming down with this tea? It supposedly has a relaxing effect. Nick drank the tea frantically. In the following days, decisions were made about their fates. Mike was reassigned to the General Affairs Department, with no chance of transfer or promotion, as per Mr. Thompson's orders. As for Nick, since the payment to the tea company hadn't yet been made, he narrowly avoided legal trouble. Instead, he was encouraged to leave the company, and to avoid further complications, Nick submitted his resignation. Rumor has it that connections between HR departments have made it difficult for him to find new employment. Even though it was good to have those two gone, something unexpected happened in the sales department. Everyone became motivated and united in refining the 50th anniversary plan. In the end, my plan was adopted. We collaborated with the Tourist Information Center to provide personalized guides. The plan, tailored to the number of guests, was truly special for the 50th anniversary. Hey, is Adam's family coming to stay? I immediately booked that special plan for my family. Sam noticed it on the reservation list and quickly picked up on it. Yes, I'm inviting my father. That's great. I might invite my parents too. I lacked the courage to face my father just as Adam. But here, with the confidence Mr. Mason praised, I felt ready. The 50th anniversary plan was a perfect opportunity to reconnect with my father. I hoped to bring back the days when we could laugh together as we once did.